Get this going. What? Come on. There we go. All right, we are recording.
All right. I think we're going to start with Jeff Seiler's question because he always leaves it as a phone message. Actually, he left one of them as a phone message, and he was giving me these teasers all month about he's going to have a question for me about theosis, Theosis, and I went, I have no idea what that is, so I checked it in the dictionary, and I couldn't find it in the dictionary. So then I was really curious as to what he was going to ask me about theosis, and hoping that he would explain it. And I haven't heard anything from him. But he did have another question. We know Jeff Seiler privilege. He gets 2 every month. This is Jeff Seiler's question. So we'll have a little listen here.
Yeah, Dave, it's Jeff still here. You really got to get that nasty woman to let people talk longer on your phone. Although I certainly understand why you don't want to let people talk longer on your phone. Anyway, to finish up, so my question for May, and this is question number 1, and yes, I'm early, and I will come back with the more studied question about theosis later in the month. But my question right now is, the Oliver 3D movie, if it's still called that, what is your take on that now? Is it still just wait and see, or is it, I've gotten some information, and Oliver and other people, myself included, have given me information about the movie, and, you know, I don't know if you really want to quote me and put it out there, but I got to say, I'm not enjoying the way it's put together so far. But I understand that so far doesn't mean that that's the way it's going to be put together at the end. So, any thoughts you might have without you or either of us offending Oliver, I would be interested to see what you have to say about it. Okay, there you go. And I'll be back soon with a question on theosis.
4, 5. Okay, so the subject is Oliver's movie, which I think is the way that we need to look at this. Oliver's 3D movie, Cerebus movie, which started, of course, when Oliver said, can I make a Cerebus movie? And I said to him, I don't know, can you? And he went, may I make a Cerebus movie? And it's like, oh. And I went, yeah, go ahead. Figuring, how would something like that ever pan out? So, yeah, sure, knock yourself up. Make a Cerebus movie. So he's obviously getting much closer to the end than he is to the beginning, and as you can tell by Jeff's phone message question, he's a little concerned about the movie that it is, and I would say about that, there's all different kind of movies out there. And usually on a spectrum between avant-garde and summer blockbuster. So the way I look at Oliver's movie, and I haven't seen anything since 2011. I tried watching what was done so far, and okay, let's talk about this. And it's like, no, we're going back to the original deal, which is when you say that the movie is finished, you show me the finished movie, and I'll go thumbs up or I'll go thumbs down. But having seen a good chunk of it, I think on the spectrum, you have to look at it as, what if I gave all 16 volumes of Cerebus to Ron Howard or to Joss Whedon and said, here, make a 90-minute Cerebus animated film out of this. They would make one kind of film. If, on the other hand, I gave all 16 volumes to David Lynch and Tim Burton, they would make a whole different kind of film. And I would maintain that Oliver's film just happens to be far closer to the David Lynch, Tim Burton end of things than the Ron Howard, Joss Whedon end of things. So, but you have to remember, Jeff, I'm not a movie fan. I'm not a person who has great reverence for cinema as some exalted state of existence that we've developed in the last 100 years. So I'm more interested in Oliver's movie from the standpoint of the unprecedented autonomy that he has in doing this, and that's a big part of it. Because I'm a big believer in creative freedom, so I'm far more interested in what somebody does as an expression of their creative freedom than I am in, is this going to make $1 billion? Not only the unprecedented autonomy, but the unprecedented animator participation that everybody that works on the film has a share in whatever it is that happens with the film down the line, and that's baked in. So those two things, as you know, Dave Sim, creative freedom advocate, and Dave Sim letting everybody off their leash. You know, if you've got something that you think service needs to be done in, and you feel very strongly about that, you're a better judge of that than I am. So go ahead and do whatever it is. Don't mind me. Go ahead.
No, I was chuckling. I mean, that's...
Oh, right.
That's...
Okay, yes. It's, but to be serious about it, it must be finished. Because, well, on the one hand, because that was the deal, that I don't pass judgment on the film until it's finished. But more importantly, finishing it would be as unprecedented and probably in terms of the real world way of looking at it, more unprecedented than Oliver's autonomy and the participation of all of the animators. And so jumping sort of sideways from that, the latest studio response, and Oliver and I are in complete agreement. We don't say so-and-so said this or this person said that. The last facts that I had from Oliver was they said, we don't have the paperwork for this. And, of course, Oliver was kind of disheartened about that, like hadn't heard back from them for a couple of months. And when they come back, they go, we don't have the paperwork for this. But what I said to Oliver was, actually, that's a very astute point. I mean, on the one hand, it's blowing you off. You know, it's saying we don't have the paperwork for a project where all of the animators participate and you have complete autonomy and final cut. So my advice to Oliver was, I don't know, what kind of money you got these days, but it would probably be worth you taking a meeting with an intellectual property lawyer, as close to Hollywood as you can get, and say to him, this is what we're doing. This is the structure of it, which is completely unprecedented. So, as the studio said, we don't have paperwork for this. What would you charge me to make the paperwork for this that would say I have final cut, I have complete jurisdiction? All of the animators have equal financial stake in this. And Dave Sim, the creator, his company, Aardvark Anaheim, gets like that same amount. So we're talking about the Oliver amount, the animator amount, add those two together, that's the Aardvark Anaheim amount. I don't know how long it would take an intellectual property lawyer to put that together, but like I say, it's a very astute point, because then when you do have a finished film, you can not only show the studio the finished film, you can show them the paperwork for it. Look, this is what an intellectual property lawyer told us would keep all of these things straightened out and all of the right eggs in the right basket. The other good sign out of that is that studio, the person that Oliver was talking about, no, it probably wasn't going to fly there, but they are passing it around. It's a really interesting thing to Hollywood people, to Hollywood insiders, because again, it's completely unprecedented. So it's like, hey, there's this 3D animated film that this guy and a bunch of animators have put together on a strictly volunteer basis, and are going to be shopping it around when it's done. Want to see it? And it's like, are you kidding? Yes, I'd love to see it. They don't have any way to really get it up to the business level floor. But in terms of, wow, that's really interesting. I've never heard of anybody doing that. It pushes their cinematic hot button, which is good, because it's very easy for all of them to get very blasé with all of the properties that they do look at. Now, having said that, I'm hoping that Oliver is on board with the same attitude that I've got with Cerebus as an intellectual property and as 16 trade paperbacks. That if you're using it as a raw material and another creative work, you're completely at liberty to do that. I wouldn't put that question to Oliver until the movie is done, so that there is a completed Oliver movie. Here it is. This is exactly the way Oliver wanted it to be, beginning to end. He can step back and say, it is now finished. But if at that point he shops it around everywhere that he possibly can, and everybody says no, or he just runs out of places to go to, is he willing to have his movie as a raw material in another creative work? And this was the stage that I got to with the last version that I saw, where I was going, well, okay, this is definitely Oliver's movie. It's like, as Captain Zap is to the comic book deal, Oliver's movie is to Hollywood. And all you can really do is say, well, Oliver, keep going, and when you get it exactly the way you want it, I'm definitely looking forward to see it. And I'll be very glad that that's part of Cerebus' legacy, is that Cerebus was the subject of the first completely autonomous, creator-owned 3D full-length animated film. But at that point, I started going, okay, if what I have seen so far in Oliver's I was treating it as a raw material, what would I do with it? Not having a studio or anything like that, it would be, okay, here's all the different parts of Oliver's film, and here's where they start, here's where they end. And I would script bridging material in it. And the concept that I came up with, might as well talk about this. I mean, we're 10 years in, and we might have 10 years yet to go before Oliver finally goes, yes, now it is done. So let me just say that my premise is that what I would add to it is that all of this is just flashbacks from the first meeting between the Friends of Yoo-Hoo journalist, who eventually becomes New Joanne, and Cerebus the Absolute Dictator, the whole premise of Latter Days, which we don't find out until we're almost at the end of Latter Days. That explains why the Oliver Simonsen movie is like Cerebus, but not really, because it's New Joanne's version of Cerebus. It's also what Cerebus the Absolute Dictator told her and left out, because he's got the hots for her. He's not going to tell her all about Jaka and all of that sort of stuff, which explains why Jaka isn't in the Oliver Simon movie. And it also includes only what interested her as a journalist, which she included, and what didn't interest her, either as a journalist or as the New Joanne, which she left out. The challenge and the fun for me, which is what this all comes down to, I come up empty if I go, okay, what would a $1 billion Cerebus movie be like? I'm not going to come up with anything with that. What would be fun and challenging to write? That I'll come up with. Is that what I would be doing is two overlapping movies. Movie number one would be the civilian version, where a person's sitting there going, this is great. I know nothing about Cerebus, but this is an interesting battle of the sexes, between Cerebus the Absolute Dictator and New Joanne. And it's got lots of really cool flashbacks to Cerebus the Absolute Dictator's sword and sorcery past. This is like a really interesting, weird character. So I'm engaged here. Movie number two would be the Cerebus fan version, where they're going, this is hilarious because they're telling it wrong. It's Cerebus rewriting Cerebus to make it impressive to New Joanne. And, it's a real balancing act to write those two things, and I'll flatter myself that I'm probably the only person who could write those two things. But that would also probably cause the movie to balloon considerably from Oliver's, he's sticking pretty close to a 90-minute length. So it might be a matter of, okay, Oliver's 90-minute film, once it moves over here and I get a studio interested in me having final cut and saying, this is what your script is going to be. This is the animation that you have to add to this animation, and it ends up being a 4-part Netflix movie, or it ends up being 2 movies, or it ends up being 7 television shows, or whatever it is. So there you go. That's
if Zack Snyder can do a 4-hour Justice League movie.
Exactly. It's like, I don't think you want to say that Josh Whedon's Justice League was or rather that Zack Snyder's Justice League was butchered by Josh Whedon. But they're two different things. That's going the other way, which is here's the long version, and Josh Whedon's job is to take however much footage there was, 4 hours or something like that.
I think they went back and filmed. I think they went back and filmed new stuff for the longer version, because it was one of the. I don't know how far they were when the split happened. Of okay, we need a new director, come in and save this. But
right.
I keep coming back to Apocalypse Now of Francis Ford Coppola spent how long quote unquote finishing this movie. And there's been like 3 versions since then of, no, this time for real, I'm finishing the movie.
Oh, I didn't know that.
There's the theatrical cut, then there's, I think, a director's cut, and I think he did an anniversary director's cut.
He's probably got one just for himself, too.
Well, I mean, that's, it's like George Lucas has said that movies aren't released, they escape.
Right.
And
right.
Every time he goes back, he tweaks another little something because, well, the angle of his head wasn't right, and with the computers, we can make it so the angle of his head is perfect.
Right. And it's, they don't so much escape as get liberated from the point of view of the studio. Let go of it. Let go. We need your movie. This, we got to have the copies printed by next Friday. You are done with the movie. And then, from my point of view, it would be whatever I came up with and whatever the studio I worked with came up with, using Oliver's film as a raw material, that would then be a raw material. So that if somebody wants to do the 28-part marathon Ken Burns Civil War version of Cerebus, by all means, I'm all done, but I'll be happy to sit in the front row and eat my popcorn at your movies. So there you go. That's the best I can do, Jeff, in terms of what about Oliver's movie? We are here, and Oliver is still finishing it, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing what the finished Oliver Simonsen movie looks like.